Got a new cup of coffee. We're looking at Luther History Part 2. Here we are in Wittenberg. Melanchthon House is there, Luther House. People, it's interesting that people said that Melanchthon was kind of the reason that people were coming to Wittenberg. He was the real scholar. I'm not sure. I mean, Luther was world famous. Now, but there at this time, imagine Wittenberg. You got Luther, you got Melanchthon, you got Cranach. He was the one that was bringing all the economy to Wittenberg, and you've got Frederick the Wise. Can you imagine? Frederick, here's one of his castles, and him and Luther never met, apparently, face to face. And Luther posted 95 theses there on the door. Now, this is because they were selling indulgences all around, but the indulgences never came here to Wittenberg. The closest they ever got was this little town called Jüterbog. Let me see. Jüterbog, which is there's kind of between Wittenberg and there it is. Look, Jüterbog. There's Wittenberg. See, let me orient us here. There's Wittenberg. There's Berlin here. Here's Jüterbog. It's a little town here, and Tetzel came here and was selling indulgences. You can still see at this in one of these churches. It's kind of a cool little town. It has the city walls all around it, and you see how they have the houses right on the wall and the garden in the middle. There's a church around. Here's a church. Let's see if it'll give us a thing. In here, you can see a box with the indulgences where they would have collected the money. It was like a big coffin. But the reason why, this is interesting, the reason why the indulgences weren't being preached over here in Wittenberg was because this was a different area, political region. Wittenberg was under the control of Frederick the Wise. Jüterbog was under the control of whoever the bishop of Speyer. What's the guy's name? The guy to whom Luther dedicated the 95 Theses. And the problem was that Frederick the Wise over here had this huge collection of relics. And every year he would put the relics out in the castle for people to come and see. And there was the second biggest collection of relics anywhere in the world outside of the Vatican. And you could go and see the relics, and you could get like 1.9 million years off of purgatory if you did the proper kind of acts of devotion with these relics there right there in the castle church. Now, can you imagine? All these people would then come to Wittenberg for November 1st to see all of these relics. And that's when Luther posts the 95 Theses, the night before everybody's coming to gather around to look at the relics. Well, he posts this 95 Theses. It causes quite an uproar. He is invited to go to the next year by the Augustinian monks to go to Heidelberg, Germany, to deliver some theses. So let's travel over to Heidelberg, Wittenberg, Heidelberg. Now, Heidelberg, let's stop there. So Heidelberg, here's Frankfort, Mainz. Man, Worms, there's Worms. Here's Heidelberg. Speyer's going to be in here somewhere, which we're going to have to find later. But Luther is invited to travel over to Heidelberg, one of the most beautiful places. I mean, look at this. I think my best pictures. There's a Heidelberg Castle. There's a bridge over the river there. Wow. There's the castle. There's an old car. He goes to beautiful Heidelberg to give the 95, or to give the theses, and he presents the Heidelberg Disputation. Let's see if we can just zoom in on Heidelberg. Now, when you go to Heidelberg, there's the Neckar River, and you have it must be that the castle is probably here. Yeah, look, here's the castle up on the hill. Oh, it's going to give us 3D so we can see it. So look, there's that. It's half ruins, half still there. So see, you can go up the street, or you can, I think they have a little train that'll go all the way up there to Heidelberg. And then you can see all these red roofed, there's the University of Heidelberg. There's a church, a nice church with a beautiful tower. Here's the bridge going across there. And then they have what's called the Philosopher's Way. This is, I would commend to you. See this way here? They have this path that walked up, it goes up there like that. That they would go, the students would go and walk with their teachers up the path and sit and talk. So that's Heidelberg. And Luther came to the Augustinian monastery there in Heidelberg. Look at what a beautiful place. Huh? And he gives the Heidelberg thesis. Amazing to me that he doesn't talk about indulgences at all, but he's pressing towards, in the Heidelberg thesis, he's pressing towards law and gospel. He's not quite there yet. What's that amusement park? I never even, that's way up there. Huh. Look at that. Hidden up in the hills, amusement park. Next time. So Luther goes over there. He's writing a bunch in 1519, and that starts to get him in trouble. So he gets summoned. The Catholics want to call him to Rome. He'd visited Rome before, but Frederick the Wise wasn't about to let him go back to Rome. So they send him over in 1521. This is the famous thing. They send Luther over to Worms. So in fact, I want to do this for effect. I want to go from Wittenberg to Rome. So let's go first to Wittenberg, and let's let Google Maps give us a little trip here. So Worms from Wittenberg. Here's Worms. Now there's the St. Peter's Church, the cathedral there in Worms. And in fact, the largest Luther memorial statue, I'll bet there's pictures, is right here. Yeah. This big Luther statue. These pictures don't show it all, really. There. I'm figuring it out. It's got Luther. It's got the 4 pre-reformers around. It has, I think that's probably Frederick the Wise and Philip of Hesse, and Melanchthon's there in the back. And it's got these major cities that are going around, all these cities that participated in the Reformation. That's, see, it's got all these city plaques around there. Pretty garden. Oh, that's right here. Okay. And here's the Cathedral of St. Peter's. And it probably was the case that, I bet this is going to show us what it would have been like. It's probably the case. Oh, the tombs underneath. There's all these famous people buried in that tomb. Some old Roman Empire stuff, Holy Roman Empire stuff. But next to this cathedral would have been a house, like a court, and it would have been right here. You see this place right there? There would have been a hall, and Luther came there, and he stood before the emperor, and he said, "Do you recant?" And he said, "Well, wait a minute, recant? I thought we were going to talk about this stuff." "No, we want you to recant. That's what we're after, recantation." So Luther says, "Well, give me a day to think about it." So he goes to think about it, and he comes back and he says, "Well, some of the stuff I've written is some of the same things that you guys say. I can't recant that. Some of the stuff I've written, I've spoken too harshly." There's a nice picture of the dome. And if you can imagine, this hall would have been like right over here into that little garden where this is all happening. "Sometimes I've spoken too harshly, and I'm sorry. But some things have to do with the gospel. And I can't recant that stuff. My conscience is held captive by the word of God. Unless I'm convinced by scripture and plain reason that I'm wrong, I will not recant. Here I stand, I can do no other." Ooh, man, that was not what those guys wanted to hear. So the whole place is in an uproar. People standing outside are cheering on Luther, way to go, Luther. But everyone else, that's like the museum that's there, it's new. Everyone else is up in arms. So they take Luther and they hustle him out of there. Okay. So here's Worms, and so again we mentioned Luther has to travel back. He was promised safe conduct from Worms to Wittenberg, but now he's declared at Worms an outlaw. The Edict of Worms occurs. I'll tell you the date. January. Sure say Domini. Who's it? Edict of Worms. 1521. He gives his response, the Here I Stand. That's April 17th, 1521. He says that on April 18th. He leaves Worms in the middle of the night, April 26th. He travels to Frankfort and then to Eisenach. He preaches there. He goes to Mora, and he's kidnapped near Mora on May the 4th, and he's brought to the Wartburg Castle. I'll show you where that is. On May 25th, 1521, Charles V issues the Edict of Worms, declaring Luther a public outlaw and a criminal. He makes it illegal to be Luther, to like Luther, to read Luther's books, to have anything to do with him. And anybody can kill Luther. He's declared an outlaw. May 25th, 1521. So now he's in the castle in the Wartburg. Let's go check it out. So Luther goes from Worms to Frankfurt. That's right up here. So let's travel from Worms to Frankfurt. Look at Frankfurt. It's a big, nice city, modern place. And then from Frankfurt over to, that's not it. Eisenach. There. And then Mora. We talked about that in the last video. Mora's down here somewhere in the plains. And then here in the forest, he's taken up to the Wartburg Castle. Look at this place. Oh, man. Now, the Wartburg, man, this is so much fun to see. Now, one of the problems is this: when you're standing there at the Wartburg, you can't really see that you are right outside of Eisenach because this hill is in the way. But you really are, and you drive up there, and then you can walk up this path, or they got a little cart to take you up there. And they got this tower, and they haven't updated this on Google Earth, but we'll look at some pictures. So it's this little castle wall all the way around. It's built in all these different parts. And no doubt there's some cool pictures here. So let's just take a look. Hey, how come these keep disappearing? Show me some pictures. Boom. Yeah, that's inside the Wartburg. That's a great picture from the top. So that shows you Eisenach there in the background. Here's the tower, the gates going around it. You can sort of see how it's way up on a hill. This is the way in around through this building, and probably right in here is the room where Luther stayed up on top. And when he was there, he was translating the New Testament, walking around the place. This is the store where you go to buy ice cream and wine. They had like a water tank there, and this is a dungeon. They had some Protestant guy in there in the dungeon. That's not a really nice story. So this is the famous Wartburg Castle there. That's a nice picture of the outside of it. So again, you can see the tower coming in, the place where Luther would have stayed right up there. Oh, now I put my face in front of the button. Pew! Same kind of iconic picture. That's from the gate in. So as you're about to pass through, you can see that. I think it's a cool looking castle because it has all these different patterns of when the different walls were built. They didn't make it all match. This is standing inside at the middle gate, looking down, and oh yeah, and this is the way out right there. So there you go out, and here's the gift shop where you can buy little bronze Luther statues. You can see I think this is a cool spot. You can see the rocks that are built so that you can see how it's just kind of built into the mountain there. So I'm gonna make my face smaller. Oh, and look at that! I made my face smaller, and I made the pictures disappear. Let's see if we can get up on this tower. These are the exact same pictures. Looking out around it, you can climb up that tower. in the back. Not that one. There's another one right over here. And it's a great view, great pictures, stunning place to be and to see the Wartburg. Now, Luther was there for like 11 months. He grew a beard, and let's see if we can. He called himself Junker George, Junker Jorge, and he was there, and he had this goofy beard. He carried a sword with him. But now think about this, if you would. This painting is a painting by Lucas Cranach, who lived not in the Wartburg Castle, but who lived in Wittenberg. Meaning that at some point when Luther was up there in the Wartburg Castle, he went back to Wittenberg to have a painting made of him because he had a beard. Now, I think that's awesome to think about. That Luther's thinking, man, this beard's kind of cool. I'm going to go back and I'm going to visit Wittenberg. So he does. He goes back and he visits Wittenberg. He has his painting taken. And probably when that happens, when Luther goes to Wittenberg, let's see if we can get there. Eisleben and all this sort of stuff. When he goes to visit Wittenberg, we're going to get there. There's Berlin. We go too far. There's Jüterbog. It's not even in here. Look. There it is. Wittenberg. He goes back and he hears about all this crazy stuff that's going on. He hears about all the iconoclasm kind of Reformation going nuts. They're smashing pictures of stuff. They're tearing down the statues. And so he goes back and he preaches his Invocavit. First week of Lent is called Invocavit. He preaches his sermons every day from the castle church. And he restores a certain amount of order there in Wittenberg. And then he just stays. So he translated, the main thing he did when he was in the Wartburg is he translated the New Testament from Greek into German. It was beautiful. And it's published there in Wittenberg. Now, a lot of things are happening. You can see the list around this time. Luther gets married there in Wittenberg. The Augustinian monastery is given to him because there's no monks anymore because they're all been reformed out of that place. And Charles V, because the Turks were threatening, says, hey, we need to get on the same page here. We need to stop fighting. And so he calls the Diet of Augsburg. Let me back up a little bit. Because there's a couple of major things that happen in Speyer. Namely the Edict of Spire and then the recension of the Edict of Spire. And this happens in 1526 and 1529. So in 1526, they get together here in Speyer and they say, look, if you're going to be a Protestant, that's all right. The ruler gets to pick. Now, Speyer is a cool town. It's built around this cathedral here, which also has a bunch of very famous dead people underneath it in the crypt. Underneath, is that might be a picture of the crypt. I think that might be the church under the church. Anyway, when we were there in the plaza outside, it was on one of the times it was on Monday of Pentecost, and there's a tradition that the bishop provides wine for all of the people, and so this whole plaza, this fountain was somehow hooked up to have wine in it. And this was full of people. And you could buy a glass for $3 and then go get as much wine as you want right out of there. That's kind of cool. So here's this, here's the Cathedral of Spire. You can see it. And it's at the end of this long street. Let me zoom out. This long street, which has a clock tower. So here's old Spire. And again, this is a place that you'll want to climb this tower here. Oh, let me see, and take a look and see and get a good view. Oh, now I've got myself lost. But you can climb up that tower and see down the street of Speyer. Now, so here's the what's the thing called? The cathedral. And it's this building right here. See this building? This is where the Diet of Spire was held. And in 1526, they said, okay, religion of the land is religion of the ruler. And then it was rescinded in 1529. Now, it was at the recension of that. This is very important for Reformation history. Is at the recension of that Diet of Spire in 1529 that a bunch of the princes who wanted to be Lutheran protested, and that's where the name Protestant came from. And it's after that second Diet of Spire in 1529 that the Smalcald League starts to form up around Philip of Hesse, and that becomes a military defensive league to defend the doctrine of the Reformation. So the 1529 that happened, and then you have Smalcald. I wonder how they smell it. Smalcalden. So the Smalcald League starts to form up over here in Smalcald, Germany, which is a kind of cool little town. Now Smalcald is most especially famous. Is that Smalcald? Yeah, that's kind of what it looks like, because of the Smalcald articles, which were written by Luther, and they had the. So here's the town plaza of Smalcald. There's the church that's there. I wonder, this isn't going to give us 3D. Here's the town hall. Here's the castle. So let's see if you can zoom in. You can sort of see that this is a three-dimensional place. Yeah, so you see the castle's kind of up on the hill here next to Smalcald. And Luther was staying there during the meeting of the Smalcald League. He was in the house like right here, like this, maybe this house or one. No, here, this one. This is I think this is the house where Luther was, but he was so sick that he couldn't get out. And so the princes had to come to him and talk. But this was all happening right here in Smalcald. Now, this also, when you're there, there's the St. George Church, which has a big tower. This is really cool because they have a bedroom up here because there's a 2-story house at the top of this tower where the watchman would live. So you can go and see that and look all around the beautiful town of Smalcald. So after 1529, the Smalcald League started to take place. Well, then Emperor Charles V called a diet down in Augsburg, which is way down south. And Luther, because of the second Diet of Spire, you see, so let's make sure we know where we are. So look, Augsburg is here's Munich, here's Augsburg. Remember Nuremberg, Berlin's way up here. So we're way down south. And Luther was now illegal again. So 1521, it was illegal to be Luther. 1526, it was legal to be Luther. 1529, it's now illegal. So he calls the Diet of Augsburg, but Luther doesn't go down there. Now, there's a place where Luther visited when he was there. I think you can see the place where the Augsburg Confession happened. This is the old city of Augsburg. But while the Augsburg Confession was happening, Luther was in the castle at Coburg. Now, let's see if we can see how far. Oops, what am I going to do? Coburg. Oh, I paused too soon. Oh, there. Okay. So there's Augsburg. There's Coburg. This is as far south as Luther could go and still be in the protection of Charles V. So Luther was at Coburg while Melanchthon and all the other princes were down at Augsburg presenting the Augsburg Confession. There's letters going back and forth. And the Augsburg Confession was presented on June 25th, 1530. And that's really kind of the beginning of the Lutherans. And so Luther was in this castle here in Coburg. Let's see if we can find the castle. Now, is that the castle? I'm not sure where the castle is going to be around here. Now, if you're going to visit, Vesta Coburg. There it is. When you go, it's going to give us 3D. Perfect. Look at that beauty. The Wartburg and the Coburg Castle are two that you are going to want to see. Not only because they're beautiful castles, but because the museums that they've built for the celebration of the 500th anniversary of the Reformation are really quite stunning. So Luther hated this. He talked about the jackdaws, these birds that were always cacawing. He says, "Here I am on the tower with the jackdaws." And you can see the room where Luther was, the place where he was. Look at this beautiful castle. I can't orient myself. Probably Luther's room was, I can't tell. Maybe it was in here somewhere. I don't know. But it has these beautiful courtyards and these the walls that go all around it. Oh, isn't that cool? Vesta Coburg, right there. So this is where Luther was. He wanted to be there in the mix. Look, you can see the little tower with the moat kind of going around it like that. Man, he wanted to be down there in the mix in Augsburg, but he couldn't. All right, what else do we need to see? So the Reformation continues. I think we've seen all the major spots. We mentioned that Luther was. Let's go back to Wittenberg. Oops. That Luther, when he was old man, I mean, in some ways things kind of settled down. He was teaching and preaching and all this sort of stuff, reforming the church, trying to figure out what it means to be, all the structure of the church was kind of in some ways torn down and had to be rebuilt up. So they built it up from Wittenberg. At the end of his life, he's traveling back down to Eisleben to settle a dispute. So he traveled from Wittenberg to Halle, and Halle is called Halle or Sala because it's right here on the Sala River, and that's kind of a cool place to see. Here's the city center. There's a huge tower. Oh, look, we got 3 dimensions in Halle. So there's a big church there. This is the place where Luther's death mask is, in this church right here, and you can see the city center of Halle. There's a bunch of other stuff in Halle too, to look around and visit. Beatles Museum? I didn't know about that. So they were crossing the Sala River on a boat. These bridges weren't there, and they almost died. When Luther was there, and he writes, Katie Lutheran says, if you worry anymore, the Lord is going to kill us for sure. They were going through somewhere, and a rock almost fell on his head and stuff. So he goes over crosses the Sala River, goes over to Eisleben, settles a dispute, preaches there, St. Andrew's Church, and then dies here. And then they take Luther in procession back. He lies in state in Eisleben. He lies in state in Halle, and then he goes to Wittenberg, and Luther is buried, wonderfully enough, in the Schloss Church, in the Castle Church there, and him and Melanchthon are buried right. What kind of picture? There it is. Oh, there's Melanchthon's tomb, the tombstone of Melanchthon in there. Luther's buried right under the pulpit. Who decided what pictures get to go in here of the church? So here is the Castle Church. You can see here's the pulpit. That's halfway up, and then it goes back. And underneath it, right there, would be the tombstone of Luther. And over here, the tombstone of Melanchthon. Luther's death was on, I'll give you the exact date, February 18th, 1546, there in Eisleben. There's this trolley, and there's a picture. That's kind of a cool picture of the Castle Church. Someone finished their cocktail, apparently. Baptismal font. That's it. That's it. That Google Maps are the pictures you're going to give us. So Luther was laid to rest there. Later, Charles V, in fact, sacked Wittenberg, took the city, and they asked if they wanted to dig Luther up out of the ground, take him out of the Catholic Church there after it became Catholic again, And Charles V said, "My fight is with the living, not with the dead," which is a classy thing to say. Now, one more thing about this. This region, this whole area of the world, this used to be East Germany, Wittenberg, Leipzig, Berlin, down to Dresden, all the way down to, here's Dresden, Prague. And this is an amazingly secular place. Maybe 9% of the people born in this area of the world are baptized. 9% are baptized. I mean, normally, culturally, people are just baptized all the time, but there's hardly anybody even, much less are believers, but didn't even, start out in the church. Probably after the Reformation was there, then came Pietism, then came rationalism, then came communism, and this place was worn out. So while we look at these things and remember the great things that happened there in the Reformation, it's good for us to remember the people who live there now in our prayers. And especially we have a Wittenberg project where I should show you guys that. Where in Wittenberg, right across from the St. Mary's Church. So there's St. Mary's Church. This building right here, see this building? This is what's called the Old Latin School. We could have also called it the Old Textile Factory. I mean, it's been a lot of things. But this now is a mission of the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. My good friend Wilhelm Weber is there now, and caring for people who come to visit Wittenberg, but also caring for people who the Germans who live there, and trying to do something to support their faith or give them faith. So when you go to Wittenberg, make sure to go to the Old Latin School and say hi to Dr. Weber. Just took over recently, and pray for the people who are there in Wittenberg.